Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, veterans, servicemen and women, students, staff, family, and guests. I'm honored to welcome you to today's Veterans Day program. Today you will hear about the significant history of Veterans Day. History students will explain how World War I, also known as the Great War, officially ended in June of 1919. However, fighting ceased between the Allied nations and Germany on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, which is 100 years ago yesterday. Today we will also hear musical selections by our elementary and junior and senior high students. In addition, we will learn of the patriotism found in a trip to our nation's capital. We'll also hear from a member of the Iowa Air National Guard, Master Sergeant Dave Twigg, an Air Force senior NCO with Pender ties, as he shares stories of his recent deployment and his career. Finally, we will recognize our local veterans, an important fraction of the 7% of the United States citizens who have worn a uniform in defense of our country, along with other members in the audience, the soldiers, airmen, Marines, or sailors who are in that less than 1% still serving today. Our debt to these people is our freedom. The program you are about to witness is by the students of Pender Public Schools. It is their program, but it is for you. It's our goal to bring to the forefront an appreciation for the courage, valor, sacrifice, loyalty, and character of those veterans. Thank you for joining us today. We will get on with the program. I would like everybody to please rise for the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner by the Pender Tonics. I would like to introduce some FFA members who will read the Veterans Day Proclamation.
President Donald J. Trump proclaims November 11, 2018 as Veterans Day, issued on November 9, 2018, by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. On November 11, 1918, the United States and its allies signed an armistice with Germany to end hostilities in World War I. The Great War exacted a tremendous toll on our nation. More than 100,000 American service members perished in the war, and the lives of countless others were forever altered.
In 1919, to honor and memorialize these sacrifices, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as Armistice Day, the precursor to Veterans Day, expressing solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service. This year, as we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the armistice, we again salute the generations upon generations of American heroes who have sacrificed so much to secure the blessings of freedom for their fellow Americans.
We will never be able to repay the debt we owe to the brave men and women who have served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. To the 20 million veterans alive today, this Veterans Day, we recommit ourselves to providing you with the care you deserve. In June, I signed into law the VA Mission Act of 2018, enacting some of the most substantial reforms of the Department of Veterans Affairs in a generation.
This landmark legislation made Veterans' Choice permanent, ensuring that our nation's veterans have timely access to the highest quality of care possible, and the flexibility to receive care either at the VA or at the private healthcare facility. The VA Mission Act is removing barriers to telemedicine, expanding access to walk-in clinics, and it is giving veterans who were catastrophically injured in World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War the same access to caregiver assistance that veterans of more recent conflicts already enjoy.
My administration is also processing veteran claims and appeals more quickly than ever before, and veterans can now use their GI Bill benefits at any point in their lives. And for the first time in history, the Department of Defense and the VA will share electronic health records, improving accessibility and easing the healthcare burden on our veterans.
For many service members, the transition into civilian life can be fraught with challenges. To enhance their access to critical resources and support, I signed an executive order that directs the Secretaries of Defense, Veterans Affairs, and Homeland Security to develop and implement a joint action plan that provides seamless access to mental health treatment and suicide prevention resources for service members in the year following the conclusion of their military service.
As we mark the centennial of the armistice, we remember the countless sacrifices that our country's heroic veterans have made throughout our history to preserve our liberty and prosperity. Our veterans embody the values and ideals of America and the timeless virtue of serving a greater cause. With respect for and in recognition of the contributions our service members have made to the advance of peace and freedom around the world, the Congress has provided 5 U.S. Code 6103A that November 11th of each year shall be set aside as a legal public holiday to honor our nation's veterans.
As Commander-in-Chief of our heroic armed forces, I humbly thank our veterans and their families for their selflessness and love of country as we remember their service and their sacrifice. Today and every day, we pay tribute to those who have worn the uniform, and we pray for the safety of all currently serving in harm's way.
Now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2018 as Veterans Day. I encourage all Americans to recognize the fortitude and sacrifice of our veterans through public ceremonies and private thoughts and prayers. I call upon federal, state, and local officials to display the flag of the United States of America and to participate in the patriotic activities in their communities. I call on all Americans, including civic and fraternal organizations, places of worship, schools, and communities, to support this day with commemorative expressions and programs.
In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 9th day of November, in the year of our Lord 2018, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 243rd, Donald J. Trump.
Good afternoon and welcome to our 2018 Veterans Day program. We greatly appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to honor and celebrate those who have given so much for our great nation. It is because of men and women like you we are free and able to pursue our own dreams knowing we are safe and protected. Although you deserve so much more, we gladly set aside one day a year to observe the sacrifice you have made for so many. The tradition of Veterans Day dates back 100 years this year, and along with honoring our veterans, we believe this is the perfect time to look back in history and understand how this beloved and necessary tradition began.
A little bit of history on Veterans Day. It was first known, please excuse me. It was first known as Armistice Day. Armistice, or ceasefire, occurred on the 11th hour of the 11th day in the 11th month of 1918 between the Allied forces and Germany. In recognition of this day, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day, stating, "To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in this country's service and with their gratitude for victory, both because of the first from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nations."
An act approved on May 13, 1938, made it a legal holiday still known as Armistice Day, primarily honoring the veterans of World War I. However, because of the involvement in the United States in World War II and Korea, the word armistice was replaced with veterans to honor all American veterans on June 1st, 1954, under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who also issued the first Veterans Day proclamation. In order to best celebrate Veterans Day, the idea of ensuring a 3-day weekend, like Memorial Day, began in 1968 and was fully implemented on October 25, 1971. Because the confusion of the date was apparent, President Gerald R. Ford signed public law which returned Veterans Day back to the original date of November 11th, starting in 1978, regardless of the day it fell, and it has remained on November 11th as a day to celebrate those veterans who are still among us and allow us an opportunity to thank them for their willingness to serve and sacrifice for our country since that time.
So today we gather together as we continue the tradition of honoring those brave and courageous men and women who selflessly chose to serve our country, and although we mourn those of whom we have lost, we take solace in celebrating the living heroes who are among us today. There are approximately 18.8 million veterans currently living in the United States, comprising of 7.6% of our population. However, we don't have to look all over the United States. We can just look around our incredible community and express from the very bottom of our hearts, thank you. Thank you for your service and sacrifice so that we can remain free. In other words of Elmer Davis, this nation will remain the land of the free only so long as it is the home of the brave.
I am a soldier, my heart is in the land. I fight for life and freedom as I walk upon the stand. I do not walk unworthy, I will not stand alone. The angels travel with me, I fight for land and home. I am a soldier, a daddy and a friend.
A comrade and a brother, a warrior to the end. I do not walk unknowing the risk upon the way, for God travels with me each and every day. Medic or mechanic, infantry or sea, I know I'll be home soon, dear, for you and for me.
Drink champagne for kings and queens.
Thank you to the government students and to the choir for their reading and performances. I'd like to introduce 4 members of the Pender FFA chapter who attended Washington Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. So they will be speaking of their favorite part of the program.
This past summer, the 4 of us had the opportunity to travel to our nation's capital for the FFA Washington Leadership Conference. While we were there, we were taught leadership and teamwork skills. We also were able to see several important monuments, such as the Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, the Washington Monument, the World War II Memorial, the Holocaust Museum, and Arlington Cemetery. Today, we will outline a few of these memorials and describe the amount of patriotism we all experience and practice while being in Washington, D.C.
One of the places we got to visit on our trip to Washington, D.C. was the Holocaust Memorial Museum. The Holocaust Museum consists of 3 separate floors of different artifacts, photos, and films. The first floor talks about the Nazi Party during World War II, the second floor talks about the final solution, and the last floor shows the victory of the Allies over Germany. When we were walking through the museum, there were 3 things that really stuck out to me. One being the Tower of Photos. The Tower of Photos goes down all 3 floors, showing different photos of those who were killed during the Holocaust. The second exhibit was a rectangular exhibit filled with shoes of those from concentration camps. And the third was a video about survivors talking about their horrific experiences and how they felt. Walking through these mentioned exhibits and more was emotional and depressing. It wasn't until that final floor until I actually took the time to think about what I had just walked through. We had the opportunity to watch videos about the liberation of concentration camps, and I finally realized the full effect of how the liberation felt to the prisoners. It was one of the most emotional, moving, and raw museums I have ever walked through, and I will never forget it.
The 4 of us were given the chance to see the changing of the guard ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. The cemetery itself was breathtaking, seeing lines and lines of gravesites representing all those who have fought for our freedom, which is often taken for granted. The changing of the guard ceremony takes place every 30 minutes from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., April through September, and every hour, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., October through March. Explaining this ritual simply doesn't give it justice until you see it for yourself. The tomb of the unknown soldier is guarded by selfless and devoted soldiers 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, in every weather imaginable. When the soldiers are not walking, their time is spent in the quarters below the tomb, where they devote their time to studying the cemetery and cleaning their weapons. It is truly a humbling and remarkable experience to realize the true dedication of a soldier who pays the ultimate price for our freedom.
We also had the opportunity to see the World War II Memorial. This memorial represents our country's involvement in the war that took place from 1939 to 1945. It honors the 16 million U.S. citizens that served in the armed forces, the more than 400,000 people who died, and all who supported the war effort from home. The World War II Memorial is a monument to the spirit, sacrifice, and commitment of the American people. There are 56 pillars and a pair of small arches around a square and a fountain. At the memorial, there are gold stars on the west side. Each gold star represents 100 Americans who died in the war. Seeing all of these stars was heartbreaking, but it also brought out a certain sense of patriotism. We all were moved by the number of people who died for our country. In front of the wall of gold stars, there is a quote that reads, "Here we mark the price of freedom." This quote accurately depicts the meaning of the wall of gold stars. We were able to understand just how many people paid the ultimate sacrifice and are forever thankful for those individuals. The Great World War II Memorial is something I personally will never forget, and I am grateful to have been able to see this moving monument in our nation's capital.
We also had the opportunity to see the John F. Kennedy's Eternal Flame in Arlington Cemetery. It pays honor and respect to one of the most famous U.S. presidents. After John F. Kennedy's death, he was placed in Arlington Cemetery. His wife wished to place an eternal flame on his grave, which was inspired by the French tomb of the unknown soldier. The flame represents the hope of keeping his ideals and his memory alive. There are thousands of people who visit this memorial every year.
We were all moved by the silence and reflection upon not only his memory, but the others around him as well. It was an experience that we will never forget.
Along with attending the leadership conference, seeing all of these monuments and memorials was truly an amazing opportunity. Throughout our leadership conference, we were not only educated on how we can better ourselves, but how we can better our community. All four of us had a life-changing opportunity that I think we can all say will greatly affect our future.
Thank you very much, 7th and 8th grade band. That was amazing.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone, especially our honored guests to our annual Veterans Day program. Today is a special day for me as well because I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, my father, Master Sergeant Dave Tuig. Without spoiling too much of his presentation, I'd like to give a very brief background of his unconventional path into the military. You see, my dad didn't join until 2002. There were many jokes made about him being the grandpa as he completed his basic training at 32 years old, just sliding in under the cutoff age. As an adult, I can greater appreciate the sacrifice of his choice by changing career paths at that point in his life and the impact it made on our family. Following his example, 3 out of the 4 of my siblings also joined the military. My sister Molly is in the Air Guard at the 185th base in Sergeant Bluff. My brother Jacob is a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton in San Diego. And my youngest sister Gracie is active duty Air Force stationed in Japan. Since joining the Air Guard in 2002, my father has been part of 3 long-term deployments, the most recent return being this August. So without further ado, I proudly introduce my father, Master Sergeant David Tuig.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Pender for asking me to be here today, staff, faculty, all the special guests in attendance, and especially to all the other veterans here today. I'm very humbled and honored to be among so many heroes. Today we celebrate Veterans Day to honor those who have served, who we wish to talk about some of the sacrifices they have made and why they do it. As Ms. Sarda said, I enlisted in 2002. I was 32 years old. It was something I always felt a strong need to do. I almost joined the Marines right out of high school, but I didn't quite pull the trigger on that. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I wanted to be part of this country and what keeps it safe. Currently, less than 0.5% of the U.S. population is actively serving in the military. That's not a lot of people. It's a very small group to ask to accept the challenge of keeping America safe and free. When I went to basic training, my wife, Lori, was working 2 part-time jobs, and she was a full-time student in college. I had 5 children. Mrs. Sarda, who was one of them, was in 8th grade. Could I get Mrs. Sarda, my wife, please stand up and be recognized? Her siblings were in 6th, 4th, 3rd, and 1st grade. My wife, to say the least, was not really thrilled with my career change at that time in her life and mine. But as she has always done, she supported me. My first deployment was in 2007, and it was for 6 months. It was a long time to be away from home. You try to get everything in order before you leave, but it never seems to go quite as planned. There always seem to be little problems along the way. My wife was left at home to take care of all of it. We were able to make 1 phone call a week, and that was for 15 minutes, if you could get through the phone lines and if they actually worked. It's rather difficult in 15 minutes to discuss all the issues that are going on at home, raising a family. It's even more difficult when you're gone and you know there's very little you can do to help. We wrote letters, and it takes about 2 weeks for a letter to get overseas. That's a long time to wait to find out if she got the furnace fixed, if the car's still running, and if the kids are behaving. Imagine texting your friends and having to wait 2 weeks for an answer to that all-important question. My last deployment was this January. As Ms. Sarda said, I returned in August. It was a 6-month deployment again, but this time there was a month of pre-deployment training that we had to accomplish to get ready for this one. I was part of the 577th Expeditionary Prime B Squadron. Expeditionary means that we travel around quite a bit. We don't just go to one base and stay there. We lived in tents and out of our duffel bags. Just to get to the country, it took about 14 hours of flying, lots of bad food, very little sleep, and we had to drag about 150 pounds of gear with us everywhere we went. When we arrived in Al Udeid, Qatar, that was our first stop, I spent 4 days there getting acclimated, getting the rest of my gear, and getting ready to go to my next destination. It took 3 trips to the airport trying to get out of there, and they failed every time we got to the counter after spending quite a bit of time waiting. The last time we went to the airport, we sat there for 9 hours. We finally got a flight. We got on the plane for another 4.5 hours. We'd arrived in Bagram, Afghanistan. Bagram was our home base, and we spent about 2 weeks there getting ready. We were trading off with a unit that had been there for the previous 6 months, and they were telling us about everything that was coming up, what was going on, and what we would be doing. Everywhere we traveled was by plane or by helicopters because convoys were far too dangerous. The first trip we took was to a small base called Camp Dalkey. It was just a little piece of ground and we needed to roughly double its size for the incoming Army Brigade. Camp Dalkey is near Pol-e-Lam province in Afghanistan. It is about 38 miles south of Kabul. It is a known stronghold for the Taliban, and the Taliban are the bad guys. My group were civil engineers. We were not combat troops. We were trained to build, not to fight. But in this deployment, we had to be ready to provide our own security and defend ourselves if needed. When we went out, we had a small contingency of Army soldiers who took care of our security around our job site. We had no trucks. We had no vehicles at all. Everywhere we went was a walk. From our tent to the chow hall was a mile walk each way. We had our 10,000 steps in after breakfast almost. We carried all of our materials, 2x4s, lumber, wiring, everything we needed to build this small city. When we first arrived, we built our first tent, and there was 28 of us living in a tent that was designed for 12. We had no showers, and living with 28 boys in a small tent, all using baby wipes, was not a very pleasant smell. We worked in full kit, as they call it. And what our kit is, our helmet, our vest, which had heavy plates in the front, back, and sides. We carried 2 first aid kits and a tourniquet. It adds about an extra 70 pounds to your weight. It's a little bit more difficult to do your job with all of that on. We had no bathrooms, so when we needed to use the facilities while we were out in the field, we dug holes for toilets. Lunch was chicken nuggets. I like chicken nuggets, but I didn't like chicken nuggets for 2 weeks straight, every day for lunch. The days were long, and it was very hard work. But the harder we worked and the longer we worked, our conditions began to improve. It wasn't too long, we soon had bathrooms and showers and more tents. We were able to spread out and have a little bit of space for ourselves. As time went on, summer began to move in, and we were told that that was the beginning of the fighting season. We were at the base of the mountains of the Hindu Kush mountain range, and they were covered with snow, and in the summer the snow would retreat, and the Taliban fighters would come down from the mountains, and the rocket attacks would pick up. The Taliban would set up rockets outside of our camp, and they would launch them. They're about the size of my leg. They had about a 12-mile range. There would be an alarm that would go off when they would detect the rockets coming in. It was a little bit unnerving and a little bit scary. Once the alarm went off, you had 11 to 13 seconds approximately to get to a bunker, hit the ditch, just basically get your gear on and wait for the rocket to land. No one was hit directly while I was there during my time. We did have a few close calls. A couple of soldiers got rudely awakened one evening when the alarm went off, and it wasn't too long after that, a rocket went through their tent and scorched a few of them on the way through. Do we have any Army veterans here today? Well, this was the first deployment I got to work with the Army. I had never really had a chance to do that on a daily basis. And the Army has a little bit of a different approach to problem solving, I learned. When we ran out of materials, 2x4s and the like, we told the Army we need more materials. And they said, okay, we'll send you more men. When we ran out of nails, they didn't send us nails. They said, we'll send you more men. There must be something that works with their philosophy, because with all of us standing around with no materials and no nails, the Army figured out that we could cut apart these large wire baskets, and we could use the wire if we bend it straight as nails. They figured it out, and we could continue the mission. The Army has a little bit rougher than the Air Force did. They spent 9 months in country on their deployment. They had about a month and a half before they left pre-deployment training, and when they got done with their 9 months of training, or their tour, they went home and they had to go to a base and spend another month and a half under demobilization. I'd like to change gears a little bit and tell you about some of the people I met and had the pleasure to work with on my last deployment and some of the sacrifices that they made. Staff Sergeant Haubrick, he was an electrician that I got to work with quite a bit during this deployment. When we found out about our deployment, I had about a year to get ready, make sure everything was in order, finances, house, kids, wife, the whole works. Staff Sergeant Haubrick got a 6-day notice that he was leaving for 6 months. He was getting ready to move back from England, where he was stationed, to the States. His wife was left to deal with all of that. They were having some health issues with some of their children. I worked for about 3 months with Staff Sergeant Haubrick, and he never complained. And one day we were talking about home and how things were going, and he told me some of the things that were going on. And every time after that, when I asked how things were going, he always just said, "It's okay." He never complained, he showed up, he completed the mission. Staff Sergeant Lechty was a firefighter. The thing I remember most about Sergeant Lechty, that he was always taking care of his men. No matter what it was, he was worried about his guys. He was always trying to wiggle his way onto a helicopter ride to get back to Bagram so he could pick up their mail and care packages and bring them back to his guys. One day we were talking, and he had told me about some of the things he had going on at home. I asked how it was going. He said, well, there was a little bit of a snafu with my paperwork and my orders. We had been there approximately 3 months, and he had received exactly 1 paycheck that entire time. I never knew that, and I'd spent 3 months with the man. He had credit card issues, debt mounting up, and his wife dealing with all of it. He never complained, and he just kept taking care of his men. Sergeant Grove was another member of the 185th who deployed to Kuwait this last year. Prior to leaving, he found out that he and his wife were going to be having children. They were going to have twins. They were very excited. We left on the deployment. He was about a month into his deployment, and he got a call that there was a problem with his wife and the baby. The Red Cross was notified, and we got him home. But by the time he returned, his wife had lost one of the twins. He spent 2 weeks at home getting his affairs in order and taking care of his wife. Then he returned. Everything was looking good. It wasn't very long after that, he received another call. There was another problem with the other baby. Once again, the Red Cross sent him home, and by the time he had returned, his wife had lost the second child. He was supposed to spend about 2 weeks with his wife and then return to finish his tour. Our leadership decided at that point it would probably be best for him to stay. He didn't ask to stay, he was ready to return and complete the mission. I had some of my own sacrifices. While I was gone, Mrs. Sardo was going to have her first child, my second grandchild. There was complications after the baby was born. Little Kane had to fight for everything that he had. It was very difficult to be there, knowing that I couldn't be there to help her through this very difficult time. In 2012, the 185th deployed to Puerto Rico for a humanitarian mission. We were building schools and working on some hospitals. One day after work, myself, Staff Sergeant Corey Mildenstein, and 2 others decided to go down to the beach and do some swimming. The waves were quite rough that day. While we were there, Sergeant Mildenstein was swept up by the waves, and he passed away that night. There were a lot of tears and no sleep that night. The next morning, we all got up and we went to work. We had to complete the mission. We finished the job and prepared to bring Corey home. When we got home, his family requested to meet those that were with him when he had died. They wanted to hear the story of how Corey died. Myself and the 2 others who were with him told the story as best we could. When we got done, his mother stood up, hugged us, looked us in the eye, and said, "I'm very sorry you had to go through that." Corey's mother made the ultimate sacrifice. She gave up her son. And at the end of the day, her largest concern was trying to comfort us. That's what a sacrifice is all about. I tell you all this because I want you to know about the quiet professionals, the men and women who wear the uniform every day. They do the job. They complete the mission. They don't call in sick. They don't start a protest. They don't walk off the job. They complete the mission. They put life at home on hold, family and friends, to deal with everything. They miss birthdays, anniversaries, births, and even deaths. They complete the mission. So today, I encourage you, when you see the veterans, tell them thank you for their service and their sacrifice. But tell their husbands, wives, children, they too have sacrificed for this country. I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today and share some of my stories about today's military. It is an honor and a privilege to be here, and it is an even bigger honor to be part of the greatest military the world has ever known. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Sergeant Tuig. The Elementary Honor Choir will present Homeward Bound. Thank you to the elementary honor choir. There's nothing like the children's voice to really hit a song home. The fourth grade is going to present red carnations to the veterans. When we do this, we will play your song, if you will, and I will announce what it is just in case you don't remember what song hits your branch of service. But when we do this, after the Army goes, then we'll ask you to sit down and we'll get the next group and so on. So we'll be playing songs and handing out flowers in just a moment. Mrs. Sardi, would you like to open? The Army. Army veterans, please stand up. Thank you very much, fourth graders. We are about to wrap up. We're going to present taps, which will have an echo. I would ask that everybody please rise, remove your hat. Thank you. You may be seated. As we close out our Veterans Day program, I have a couple announcements. But first, I would like to point out, we had a drawing. There's an American flag Afghan out in the entryway that was knitted by Joe Lutert and donated to us to present somehow. So what the committee chose to do was do a drawing by any veterans that had a chance to get a ticket. So I would like to call Joshua Lutert down here to pluck a ticket out of the basket. And we'll see who gets it. So you need to have your ticket out with your number. Just one. You can read the number? That's okay.
7148085.
It's a beautiful flag. If you get a chance to take a look at it before we take it down and give it to the Wickmans, that'd be great. Thank you again to Joe. One group that Sergeant Tuig talked about that I have personal experience with saying is very important as well is the families of the veterans, because the sacrifice they have is sometimes greater. So I would like the families of the veterans, please rise, and everybody give them a hand. I think sometimes it's easier to be the one that's deployed because the ones back home have to take care of all the business. So, once again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. Thank the veterans, of course, and we have a couple young men in uniform here today, and I'd like to thank them as well, and current members of the military who are next group of veterans, you could say. In fact, there's even one just got back from basic training Marine Corps boot camp. Jesse Thompson, you want to stand up and wave? He's not in uniform, but it's great to see the way we carry on. More people enlisting. Before we close, I'd like to ask that the guests please stay in their seats and the high school stay in your seats while we dismiss the elementary students. When I dismiss the high school, you are going to, yes, 8th period. FFA members in official dress, I'd like you to come up front because we're going to take a picture and I'm going to ask some of you to serve cookies. Sorry, kids, the cookies are not for you. I would also like to thank Mrs. Icy for the slideshow at the beginning, to Mrs. Colbeck, Mr. Jagala, Mrs. Sarda, and Mrs. Brown for all the help that they have given to set up this event today, and of course to all the elementary teachers as well. And with that, I'm going to tell you once again, thank you for coming. Have a great Veterans Day.